So I have to tell you the truth here. I was just about to start my narration for this episode when suddenly, through no intervention of my own, into my headphones came the voice of Gordon Lightfoot singing The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The ship was the pride of the American side on the lake that they called Gitche Gumee, or something like that. I feel like I'm in the Canada section at Epcot. I'm tempted to let it go on, but I'm afraid it will somehow leak onto the podcast soundtrack, and then we'll all be in trouble. I'm not sure I can stick to my own words while hearing Gordon in tone. Fellas, it's been good to know ya. Have you ever wondered whether George Steinbrenner knew those guys? I mean, he was a Great Lakes shipper when he bought the Yankees. That was where his money came from. Let's all start over. Do you ever play Immaculate Grid on the Baseball Reference? I've had that definite article for some reason. Often they'll give you some cross-league juxtaposition of teams, like name a player who was with both the Cubs and the White Sox. Now, you could answer Sammy Sosa, but you'd be too quick on the draw because everyone knows that, and you'd pay a high price for using him. The same thing might go for Ron Santo. Too many people know about him as well. But if you're me, this is my boast. It's a humble brag. Well, no, it's not humble at all. I mean, I study this stuff for a living, so you would expect me to do this. I think, well, these teams have coexisted for 125 years now, and there was probably someone who jumped way back in, 1903, who your typical fan will be less aware of. Sometimes I know who that guy is, and sometimes I don't, and that's the fun for me. Also, the frustration. And that's very easy in same league pairings. If you ask me for a Yankee and a Brown, I'm there with an answer from the dead ball era pretty quickly. Ask me for a Yankee and a Red from back then, though, and I might struggle for a bit, because not too many players crossed the barrier between leagues until relatively recently. There's always someone, but again, does that fella come to mind? Now it's commonplace for us to watch players do that, such as Shohei Ohtani going from the Angels to the Dodgers, or most recently Juan Soto going from the Yankees to the Mets. But after that early period, when NL players were disregarding their contracts to get AL money and the peace settlement occurred, most of the time players did stick to their initial leagues. Changing circuits was a lot like changing companies. These were run as allied but separate confederacies. It was for that reason that Casey Stengel, pretty good dead ball era outfielder, also early lively ball era outfielder, only faced the big train, Walter Johnson, all-time great strikeout pitcher, one time. Oddly enough, John McGraw's Giants, for whom Casey played, did meet Johnson's Washington Senators in the World Series, but it happened the year after Casey was traded away, and Johnson was at the very end of his career. No, it happened, it had to happen, in an off-season exhibition game. It took place between 1917 and 1918 in Humboldt, Kansas, Walter Johnson's hometown. They held an annual Walter Johnson Day. And the nice thing about that is that the actual Walter Johnson would show up and actually pitch. It wasn't like a Timothy Chalamet lookalike contest. Walter was actually there. Now, I'm a little confused about this. It's possible that that paragon of honesty, Charles Dillon Stengel, who was not, in general, someone who fabricated things out of whole cloth, although he was known to hyperbolize quite a bit, might have fibbed about this game. In the 1917 version of the Walter Johnson Day game, Johnson pitched for the hometown Humboldt Grays and whipped the visiting Kansas City Red Sox 1-0, with Johnson whiffing 20 while allowing 3 hits and walking none. Casey, who was from Kansas City, wintered in Kansas City at that time, said he played in the game, although I do not see his name in the box score for the Red Sox, a team which did have some recognizable major league players going for it. Possibly I have identified the wrong offseason Walter Johnson 20 strikeout game. You'd kind of have to assume that any time peak career Walter Johnson was pitching against players or teams of below major league quality, that he routinely whiffed 20, assuming he was trying at all. Still, the story is too good to skip just because I can't prove it. It's simply this. Casey said that Johnson whiffed him 4 times, and that after the game, the headlines in the paper said, Johnson fans 20, Stengel fails to hit in clutch. Life is unfair like that sometimes, often, especially in the infinite inning. Well, hello there, and welcome back to the show, number 312 in an ongoing series. This is The Infinite Inning. I am your host, as always, Stephen Goldman. And Stephen Goldman has a confession to make, and it's not just that he can't get the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald out of his head. It's that, you know how each week I say, gonna try to make the show shorter, and it's not, ever. And of course, some of you have said, stop trying to do that. We like it long. And that's very flattering, and I appreciate it. But this week, it will be shorter for several reasons. One, as you can hear, I just woke up without a whole lot of voice today, and this is kind of effortful for me. And by the end, I may sound like modern-day Bob Dylan. Not like 1985 Bob Dylan, I'm seeing the real you at last. No, just someone who has had their throat surgically removed and wouldn't pay for the high-tech upgrade, so instead they installed a rusty tomato can. Don't be mad, Bob. I mean it affectionately. I honestly do. Second, I'm on book deadline, multiple book deadline. I've been alluding to it. It's going to be true for a while longer. My hair is currently on fire. I would dunk it in the lake that they call Gitchy Goomy, but I'm nowhere near there, and it would probably come out covered in zebra mussels. Combine those two factors, deadline pressure, my lack of a voice, and the fact that it's the Friday night before Christmas, with my awareness that, like me, you are also distracted by family matters and hardly have time to join me for our regular trip to understanding the present via a journey to the past, and it just seems like a wiser thing to do to hang fire and keep our powder dry for after Christmas and New Year's. Now, I'm not saying I won't appear with another episode between Christmas and New Year's, because I think the calendar will work out nicely for that to happen. It might be another mini episode, though. And so, for the remainder of this episode, I have a little short story for you. It's not really even a story, just an observation, a game that I noticed while working on said book project, which will be out next summer, and I think you will like it, and I will say more about it soon. I hope you will. And what's interesting to me, or fascinating really, is that this is ground I've been over personally many, many times. I wrote a book about Casey Stengel in 1949. I mean, it's about all the years leading up to that, but also spends a lot of time on 1949. And there just wasn't the ability to look at this particular aspect of that season in as granular fashion as I did this week, today, in fact. And I wanted to share it with you, because I love to share my toys. This is, I think, a flaw of mine. It bothers me. If I'm excited by an idea, and it could be nothing more complicated than an idea, but it could be a book I read or a movie I saw or a song I heard, I really want someone else to share that feeling with me. I don't want to just love it alone. I want to love it as part of a couple or a throuple or a polycule. Not in a sexual way, I mean, but to have a club around it, and then we can all enjoy it together. And sometimes it happens, but the flaw is I'm not sure what I expect to get out of that, because most of the time, the feedback you get is, yeah, that was pretty good, man. That was cool. I think I want some kind of very deep interrogation of it, that we will talk about it for hours and together uncover facets of the thing. It could be a person, it could be a place that individually we would not have understood on our own. That was redundant, individually on our own, but you get the point. But I don't want things to be like that Edgar Allan Poe poem, the one that he left unfinished. I'm not sure how many he left unfinished, but this is the one that I always think of as unfinished because it ends abruptly with the line, "of a demon, in my view." Yes, and? Well, it's been 175 years, and if he hasn't told us by now, I don't think he's going to, but it begins, "From childhood's hour I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. And then somehow a demon gets involved. I think it's a metaphorical demon, not a literal demon. It's not like the Ghost Rider shows up, or Etrigan. Gone, gone, O form of man, rise the demon Etrigan. No, it's just a cloud. It's a cloud that takes on a sinister shape, and I don't know what happened. He hit the bottle, is what happened next. Got on a ship for New York, ended up in Baltimore. You know the rest. Now that I think about it, I believe there's one unfinished short story as well, at least one unfinished short story, something about a lighthouse, a sinister lighthouse. Is that the Eggers movie? Is that where that began? January 2nd. I have passed this day in a species of ecstasy that I find it impossible to describe. My passion for solitude could scarcely have been more thoroughly gratified. I do not say satisfied, for I believe I should never be satiated with such delight as I have experienced today. And that's where the first song in the musical should begin. Very briefly, as you know, on and off, I've been opening up the Infinite Inning request line over at Blue Sky, giving Virgin Baseball Prospectus subscribers a chance to name their subject for a future column of mine. And this week was one of those. A fella asked for a Luke Appling story. I'm not sure. He said he liked it, but I'm certain I didn't give him what he expected, because what I decided to do was riff on the player known as Old Aches and Pains and the murder of a health insurance executive. It's not as obvious, I hope, as I just made it sound. I promise it's not. But I very much hope that you will check it out and let me know what you think. The response thus far, it's been up a little over 24 hours, has been very positive. And of course, if you would like to request a topic and you are not yet a Baseball Prospectus subscriber, or you are about to renew, simply send me a screenshot over at Blue Sky of your subscription with the date and name your subject. And as Craig Goldstein says, within reason, I will take that on. But I don't think it needs to be within reason. I would enjoy the challenge of one that is completely unreasonable, and I will try to figure out how to keep you, the customer, satisfied. And yes, that's a reference to the Simon and Garfunkel song. That's what I'm here for, contrapot, to satiate your delight. Or was that vice versa? Well, either way, let's satiate our fatigue and our thirst, perhaps. I'm going to pour some motor oil on my vocal cords. And when we return, and I hope you do, I hope you don't simply exit through the lobby hoping no one notices, we'll take a quick jaunt to July 1st, 1949. As hinted before the break, I have one other Stengel-oriented story I wanted to share with you because it's such a fluke, and yet it colored his reputation in a positive way, too, for the rest of his career. Still, we must debunk that which requires debunking, which truth requires debunking. On July 1st, 1949, the Yankees were playing at Washington at the Nationals or Senators, however you want to express yourself. They trailed 4-1 going to the top of the ninth. They were losing on RBIs by players with names like Al Kozar and Mark Christman, which must have been frustrating. There was an Eddie Robinson 2-run homer as well, which must have been a little easier to take, although the base runner he scored, Clyde Vollmer, was on only because Jerry Coleman, normally a second baseman, was playing shortstop that day and fumbled a grounder. Phil Rizzuto, the scooter, normally the starter, missed one game all year, and this happened to be that game. He had a mild concussion after being bumped by Johnny Pesky, and Pesky wasn't even his real name, during the previous series. There was another regular out as well. Catcher, you guessed it, Yogi Berra, one of the most durable backstops of all time, and he was getting a rare day off. Now let me pause the narrative for this thought that I hope will set up the rest. Every winter, for the last 3 years, you've probably seen the stories out of Philadelphia about their catcher, JT Realmuto, and how the Phillies know they have to give him a little more time out from behind the plate. maybe DH him a bit, or give him a day at first base. But aside from the occasional IL placement, they never do get around to doing that because the alternatives have been Garrett Stubbs and Andrew Knapp, and it's no knock on them that they haven't hit. Being a reserve catcher is like being a pinch hitter all the time. You play once a week, and it's tough for a player to find any consistency that way. Add in that they're generally there for their gloves ahead of their bats, because if they had bats, they'd be starting somewhere, and they just can't get a break. The converse of that is that sometimes a reserve catcher will turn around and hit 350, and it's not because he turned into Ernie Lombardi at the hotel, but because luck doesn't even out in small samples. To give you one fairly recent example, just off the top of my head, you might recall that in the late 1990s, the Atlanta Braves had a very fine offensive catcher as a starter in Javi Lopez, who in a full season was usually good for a .290 average and 30 home runs, although he once hit 43. The only problem was that Greg Maddux preferred to throw to the backup, Eduardo Perez. And of course, if Greg Maddux wants that, Greg Maddux gets that. Eduardo Perez, however, was a .253, .297, .390 career hitter. Except, though, in 1998, he hit .336 with a .404 on base and a .537 slugging percentage because in only 167 plate appearances, anything can happen, including God expressing his sense of humor. Casey Stengel once said of Yogi Berra and Elston Howard that normally, when it comes to a great player, you can substitute, but you can never replace. Howard had given him the opportunity to do that when it came to Berra. However, in the season that we're discussing, Howard was a long way away for reasons that, well, are not flattering to the Yankees, and you know them, and we won't get into them this time. So rather than put Charlie Silvera or Ralph Houck out there, Casey just kept going with Yogi, and unlike most catchers, for some reason he could handle it. Not this day in 1949, though. Late in the season, he'd fracture a thumb, and Stengel pushed him back out then because I guess it was a hairline thing and Yogi just had to be willing to play through the pain. Fortunately for both of them, he tended to avoid that sort of disabling injury. He was both durable and he was also lucky. They both were. So pinch hitting is also luck. Casey was supposed to be a master of knowing which pinch hitter to call on when, but if you look at the pinch hitting numbers for the Yankees during his long run in the Bronx, or for his career as a whole, there's nothing particularly special that happened. In some years, Enos Slaughter was a very good pinch hitter for him. In others, he wasn't. Again, small sample luck. Also, Slaughter was still playing when he was about 75, so you wouldn't expect him to do well. Johnny Mize had 2 very good years pinch hitting and 2 that weren't so great, although in one of the poor ones he did hit a couple of home runs, and I'm of the opinion that any time a pinch hitter hits any home runs, even if he went 1 for 100 on the season, well, at least he did the hard thing. Supposedly, Casey was always pinch hitting Gene Woodling for Hank Bauer and vice versa, and to great effect, but it didn't happen that often, and again, some years were good and some bad. But there was this one time in Casey's first year with the Yankees that all that pinch hitting worked really well, and I think that this game was what cemented his reputation for the rest of time. As I said, it was July 1st, 1949, a season in which every win counted. The Yankees were, as I said, at Washington first in WAR, first in peace last in the American League, and indeed they lost 104 games that year. There's another fun Senators-Yankees game to look at later that same season in the Bronx that September when the Yankees beat the Nats 20-5. They hit no home runs, but they made 17 hits and also drew 17 walks, and I assume that the time of the game was 17 years. The July 1st game was more competitive. Eddie Lopat started for the Yankees, but he didn't have it. Nor did Yankees reliever Fred Sanford, later star of Sanford & Son, with its famous Quincy Jones theme song, Rest in Peace, Quincy. So 4 runs were scored by this fairly impotent Senators offense. Lefty Mickey Harris, a few years removed from Joe Cronin mistaking him for a staff ace in the 1946 World Series, started for the Senators. He'd go 4-15 with a 5.13 ERA that year, but in this game, he held the Yankees to 1 run going to the top of the 9th. And then he simply lost it. Joe DiMaggio led off and drew a walk. Third baseman Billy Johnson also drew a walk. And I was going to say that Senators manager Joe Cool must have been called away to the courtesy phone and so wasn't paying attention, but actually he had been ejected back in the 7th for arguing that Johnny Lindell had wandered off of third base to go to the dugout and get a drink without calling time. He had some wonderful old names on his coaching staff: Nick Altrock, Rick Farrell, Clyde Milan, Sam West, so there was enough veteran know-how out there to have made a move to the bullpen, but So left fielder Johnny Lindell, creator of the alcoholic beverage known as the Lindell Bomber, took 4 bombs himself and walked to first. Bases loaded, no outs, all on walks. The coaches finally awoke and made a move and brought in a righty reliever named Dick Welteroth. Eventual career ERA, 6.48 in 90 games. Stengel also made a move. Going with the platoon, he did pinch hit Gene Woodling for Hank Bauer. I can point you to 3 different books that tell you with a straight face that Stengel did this every game and that he did it in games in which Bauer had started out 4 for 4 or had hit 2 home runs, and Stengel didn't care. He was going to call in his pinch hitter no matter what, sometimes even going against the platoon to do so. It's really not true. Now, it happens that in this game, Bauer hadn't done anything, but say he had hit 3 home runs, but it was still the 9th inning and his team was still trailing, and it doesn't have to be about Hank Bauer. It could be about anybody. And the manager feels that the matchup that's coming is disadvantageous. Do you say, well, he's hit 3 home runs, he probably will hit a 4th? Or do you say he's hit 3 home runs and the likelihood of his hitting a 4th, particularly when the pitcher has the platoon or the pitcher throws a pitch that he's not good at hitting or any other factor, makes the chances of a 4 home run game infinitesimal when they were infinitesimal to begin with? And do you play to the player's ego or do you play to your job, which is trying to win the game? That's why most of those discussions of the Bauer-Woodling thing are so dumb, to be honest. And I understand that it annoyed Woodling and Bauer at the time, although after the fact they both said, no, he got the most out of us that he could. So that's nice. But those stories persist, and if they had some logic to them, I tell you, but they don't. And here's the icing on the cake. Here's the thing I couldn't do, easily at least, until Baseball Reference made it possible. Do you know how many times in 6 years that Stengel directly pinch hit Woodling for Bauer? 11 times. If you want to take that as an average, not quite twice a year. Oh my God, he was so out of line. So Woodling in this game pinch hits for Bauer, and yes, he goes the other way. He singles to left. DiMaggio scores, but Johnson was sent aggressively when the left fielder bobbled the ball. The left fielder recovered in time. Johnson is out at the plate, runners on first and second, 1 out, and Stengel calls on his 2nd consecutive pinch hitter, this time to replace catcher Charlie Silvera. It's probably pretty easy to guess who it was, right? Yes, America, it's Yogi Berra. And he singled. Nice to have Yogi Berra on the bench. It's like the Hamilton song, nice to have George Washington on your side. Nice to have Yogi Berra on the bench. He singled and drove in Johnny Lindell, 4-3 Senators, runners on first and second and 1 down, and the College of Coaches, subbing for Joe Cool, made another move. This time they brought in Lloyd Hiddle. His eventual career ERA, 4.43, which A, wasn't so bad, and B, the guy spent 4 years in the service before making it to the majors. This was during the war. He probably didn't get special treatment because he wasn't yet a famous person, and it's worth remembering that this was 1949, and some of the best pitchers of this generation never happened because they were in the service instead of getting to play as teenagers or are buried at Arlington or Normandy or wherever else we maintain military cemeteries. Now, Hiddle was a lefty, but this time, Stengel went against the platoon and called on his 3rd straight pinch hitter, one of the all-time Yankees greats, whose career was winding down due to a bad back. Yes, it's Charlie Keller. And King Kong, to make a long story short, tripled home both runners, Yankees 5, Senators 4. Neither Jerry Coleman nor Snuffy Sternweiss could get Keller home with 1 and then 2 outs, but it didn't matter because the Yankees fireman, the gay reliever Joe Page, came on and closed things out, barely, but he did it. 5-4 Yankees was the final, and you can imagine what John and Susan were saying about then. The Washington Evening Star headline, Nats morale hard hit as Yankees grab game when Harris blows. It was the sort of game that yanks the heart from a skidding club holding ideas of a comeback. hey, those ideas were delusional and you can't blame the Yankees for yanking them. That's what Yankees do. Not that Yankees means one who yanks. If you name your team the Tigers or the Penguins, then you're making an allusion to literal tigers or penguins, but Yankees just means Yankees. Yankees refer to themselves. It's a totally circular thing. It has very little independent meaning outside of Yankees. It's either people who live above the Mason-Dixon line and didn't rebel against the federal government, or those guys in pinstripe pajamas. It is not an animal found in the outback who squeals when it's happy and eats fish, but not all fish, just some fish. Batteries not included. A quick note on infielder Mark Christman, who was in the majors on and off from 1938 through 1949. There was a 3-year gap in there so he could take a worldwide tour of Toledo, Ohio. This was his last year in the majors. Early in the game, he hit a foul pop, and Yankees first baseman Tommy Henrich, formerly an outfielder, but another veteran who was restricted by injuries, just like Keller and Jolton Joe DiMaggio, who would miss half the 49 season with a hot heel due to bone spurs, ran into the bat rack trying to catch that foul pop and had the wind knocked out of him. The play was actually significant because the Senators' runner was able to tag from third while Henrich was lying there gasping. Holy shades of Lombardi's snooze, Batman. The Daily News published a photo of Henrich down on the ground, teammates crowded around him, and you could swear that one of his teammates was trying to choke him out, which seems purely redundant under the circumstances, but I guess he was just trying to help him up by the throat. And that's a good note to end on for Christmas, if ever there was one. If you'd like to check me on that image, I added it to our Facebook group. And of course, I'll be back after the holiday with more tales from the infinite inning. I hope you have a safe and joyous time, whether this is your holiday or not, and that you cherish every moment in the bosom of your family, even if Aunt Joan can be kind of a pain sometimes. She means well. I mean, within her capacity to mean well. I better quit while I'm ahead. Happy holidays, everyone, sincerely, from me and all the ghosts who haunt the possibility of peace on earth and goodwill towards all men, from the place where they await the arrival of both, the infinite inning.